Hello, I'm a dude doing news, and here's some of that news. The President of the United States said that all undocumented immigrants aren't even people, they're animals. End of story, you're welcome for the news. In some other news, the President of the United States specifically said that MS-13 gang members specifically aren't people, they're animals. And the libs are out in droves, saying that MS-13 gang members are good, actually. But here's some more news. The president was discussing ICE tactics and limitations in a meeting with sheriffs, and one sheriff said, "There could be an MS-13 member I know about. If they don't reach a certain threshold, I cannot tell ICE about it." The sheriff is complaining that there is an evidentiary threshold necessary to turn someone over to ICE. She uses MS-13 as an example because it's an easy catch-all scapegoat for immigrant crime. But she's just saying there are some people who don't meet that evidentiary threshold, so I can't turn them into ICE. And of course, President "Some Nazis are fine people" took the bait and said,
"But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. And we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before."
Now, it's fine to criticize the media for portraying this statement as being about all undocumented immigrants, especially when MS-13 originated in Los Angeles and represents a small amount of the crime in the US with no more than 10,000 people. But the media's misleading portrayal of Trump's quote is not an excuse to dismiss what he said, or dismiss how it does relate to all undocumented immigrants. And I hope I don't have to spend too much time to explain that even criminals are human beings, and to remove humanity from people who commit vile acts makes it easier to treat them inhumanely with violence and ignores darker aspects of humanity, and the many ways a person's environment and abuse can lead a person to commit vile, unspeakable acts. So instead, I will not spend too much time doing that. Even the Federalist says one could make a fair argument that Trump ought not call MS-13 members animals. Okay, so referring to criminals as human beings does not mean you think MS-13 is good. Decent amount of time spent. But also, it's pretty dishonest to not see how this way of talking does have to do with undocumented and documented immigrants who are not members of MS-13. The sheriff wasn't asking about MS-13, she was mentioning MS-13 in the context of having to pass a certain evidentiary threshold in order for ICE to take action. The president's response didn't mention MS-13. He talked about people, then bad people, then not people, then animals. He is being very vague and making it easier for him, for ICE, for his supporters to lump violent gang members in with illegal immigrants. He does this. He's done this. Doing it wise? He is. Literally the first thing he said after "I want to be the president" was that Mexican immigrants are bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and cough cough, some I assume are good people, puke puke. His supporters and his media regularly make the provably false assertion that undocumented immigrants commit more crime than non-immigrants. At a rally just last month, Trump was talking about a caravan of migrants seeking asylum and said, "Yesterday, it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody has ever seen before. They don't want to mention that." No reports could be found from that particular yesterday, and so the White House pointed to an article about previous caravans and how the caravans and migrants were the ones raped by cartel members and immigration agents in Mexico. But the president says it like these migrant caravans are full of rapists and drug dealers, and some I assume are good people. This dehumanization leaks over to others very easily because of how people are. Just this week, a video surfaced of a lawyer in New York seen shouting at workers at a restaurant for speaking Spanish, said, "I bet you're undocumented," and then threatened to call ICE on them. But I'm sure ICE agents, one seen here on the verge of tears in front of the president because people are mean to ICE agents, I'm sure they'll treat these possibly undocumented workers well. Like how a few days ago a federal judge just found that ICE agents took into custody a DACA recipient who, after repeatedly telling them he had a work permit, was told it doesn't matter because you weren't born in this country, and over the past year lied, doctored information, and claimed he was in a gang based on nothing. He was not in a gang. I wonder what that experience might do to a human being, or even an animal. It's very easy to broadly dehumanize people with this kind of sinister, vague language. Ben Shapiro might tweet something like, "Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. This is not a difficult issue. Hashtag settlements rock." Now, of course, what Ben's referring to is the ongoing Palestinian-Israeli conflict that ostensibly began when 700,000 Palestinians were removed from their homes, and the UN divided the land into 2 states, 6 countries. Good call, y'all. Great way to avoid conflict. And the conflict continued. And I don't have time to get into it all, it's very complex and long, but now we're here, with Israel participating in what the international community refers to as the illegal occupation of Palestinian land. And Ben is saying that it's good and not a difficult issue. Israelis like to build illegal settlements. Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. Now, this lack of nuance and decency is not surprising, coming from a guy who once falsely claimed the radical Muslim minority is a myth, and it's a myth that's, quote, going to get a lot of civilized people killed. I sure hope scared idiots don't watch your videos, Ben. People use this tweet to point out that Ben's a racist, but he recently wrote an article addressing this, pointing to other tweets that people ignore. Shame on you, where he clarified, not all Arabs like open sewage and blowing things up. Just Palestinians and their allies. Now, what I like about this clarification is that it's better? Not Arabs, not terrorists specifically, but Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and all the Palestinian people, even though their approval of Hamas actually plummeted once they took power, and only rose a bit after the end of the 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict, probably because war tends to make people support their government when it seems like they're stopping others from killing you. Conflicts full of horrors and war crimes tend to do that. Also, Hamas kills Palestinians who dissent. But yeah, Ben, not all Arabs, but Palestinians who oppose Israel merely want to bomb crap and live in open sewage. It's great having 96% contaminated water while a country occupies one part of your land and isolates the other part. This language is perhaps a bit dehumanizing to an entire people. So when there's a march of return of thousands of Palestinians in a 6-week protest leading up to the anniversary of when more than 700,000 Palestinians were purged from their homes and land, and some of those protesters are members of Hamas, and many aren't, as people throw rocks and tie a few Molotov cocktails to kites towards one of the most powerful armies in the world, and the army responds by shooting 60 people dead and injuring thousands, this dehumanization and conflation of bad people with people can allow others to say, these weren't peaceful protesters. What, you love Hamas now? The White House and the US ambassador can say that this was a propaganda attempt by Hamas and walk out when the Palestinian ambassador starts to speak and block the UN's request to investigate what happened. And when a Hamas official says that 50 of the 62 dead were Hamas, everyone can be like, now I believe Hamas, and it's damn good that those 50 animals are dead. In fact, according to former Congressman Joe Walsh, good, the world is a much better place anytime a Muslim terrorist is killed. 50 of them killed on Monday? That's fantastic news. Ignore those 12 people, some children, a baby, and the thousands injured because animals died. Hey, Joe, you know another time some terrorists died? 9/11. Anyway, all of these Palestinians deserved it for being there. It's all fake anyway, as evidenced by this widely shared video of a dude on crutches not needing crutches. This video, by the way, was shared by Ari Fleischer, one of the many liars who lied us into the Iraq War based on lies. Ari shared the video adding, "The media always falls for it." Right on, Ari Fleischer. So this guy didn't really need crutches. He's faking. But this guy's not faking, and he's dead now. A lot of people are. People who just love living in sewage. And this is all a bummer. End of story. On to some good news. Here's some real good news. A landlord with $1.2 billion of debt fulfilled his goal of fixing the Middle East by officially moving the US Embassy to Jerusalem, a move seen by the United Nations as a big mistake. The proud husband of the president's crush met with his wife, an equally qualified government official and the president's f***ing daughter. And there was celebration and food with Ted Cruz for some reason, and the executive and communications director of the Koch brothers' libertarian cool kids club, Turning Point USA, for some reason. It was all a real good time, and the president's son-in-law, who's implicated in many crimes involving using his influence to make money via foreign policy issues involving Qatar specifically, some to help his former felon father build a tower, some because they have incriminating information about him, some because he wanted money. Qatar, you might remember from the president's real good at being raided by the FBI lawyer Michael Cohen, who's been paid millions of dollars by companies like AT&T and Novartis for insight into the Trump administration. Cohen also reportedly asked for $1 million from the head of Qatar Industries, the company that bought 19.5% of Russian oil giant Rosneft, which you might know from the Steele dossier written before the sale, which alleges that Carter Page offered Donald Trump's help if he was elected in exchange for brokering the Rosneft deal between Qatar Industries, the head of which was photographed in Trump Tower the December after Trump was elected. Why did I start talking about this? Oh yeah, Jared Kushner's probably going to prison for at least a little while. But he did a good job with the Jerusalem thing, is what I'm saying. And I look forward to his work on the opioid epidemic. I hope that working with the pharmaceutical industry helps him get out of $1.2 billion of debt. You'll do great, you're great at everything. Speaking of Jared Kushner being great at everything, for the prayer of the opening of the US Embassy in Jerusalem, Jared brought an anti-Semitic pastor who said that Jews are going to hell. Meanwhile, miles away on the border is that scene in every f***ing Marvel movie, you know, where like the heroes are behind a wall waiting for the horde of wild beasts to break through for the big battle. It was like that. And I'm exaggerating, obviously. It's not like the current under investigation for corruption Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he built the border fence to protect them from wild beasts. But of course that's where I'm going with this, because yeah, he did. Rabbi Ben Dahan is the Deputy Defense Minister for Israel. He's responsible for governing the West Bank occupation planning, building infrastructure, and for authorizing Palestinian travel and entry into Israel from Gaza and the West Bank. And that guy said, Palestinians are beasts. They are not human. Not terrorists, not Hamas specifically, not the Palestinian Authority, but Palestinians. But don't worry, he's also said, to me, they are like animals. They aren't human. So awesome, we've come back around to my favorite dude. It's not good that the president refers to criminals as animals in the vaguest language possible and blatantly lies that migrants are raping each other and they're coming this way, and speaks so flippantly about this stuff. As Charlie Kirk, the Koch brothers' libertarian cool kids club captain of Turning Point USA says, foreign nationals who illegally enter America and commit crimes are animals. But also, as folks like Charlie point out, being in America illegally is a crime. They're criminals for being here. So are all undocumented immigrants criminals because they're here illegally? Are all undocumented immigrants animals? Are all criminals animals? A Georgia gubernatorial candidate has been riding around in a deportation bus that he promises to fill with illegals, which is a pretty dehumanizing way to refer to undocumented immigrants, but maybe that humanizes them too much. So let's do illegal aliens, a word for non-human. Cool. So this wannabe governor wants to deport all the illegals, except on his deportation bus it reads, murderers, rapists, kidnappers, child molesters, and other criminals on board. So, illegals. Okay. The bus also reads, follow me to Mexico, because we're going to gather up all the undocumented immigrants in Georgia, and we're going to ship those murderers, rapists, kidnappers, child molesters, and other criminals from Georgia to only Mexico. Language is fun, and certainly doesn't affect anything. So I guess my point with all the stuff I've been saying is that yes, part of these Trump calls some undocumented immigrants animals headlines are a bit misleading and sensationalistic. But some of it's because Trump was so vague and unspecific in his language. And most of it is because it's obvious shorthand for, hey, Trump said another one of those fucked up Hitler things again. No, please don't leave just because I'm going to spend the rest of this episode comparing Trump to Hitler. I know many of the things you're going to say. Well, Hitler had gun control and you want gun control. You're the Hitler. Hitler? Except Hitler actually loosened gun laws until tightening them for Jews. Also, you want to talk gun control? What about the president who out loud on camera just suggests taking people's guns with no due process? Now, some history buffs might point out, well, Nazis are National Socialists, and there's the word socialist in National Socialists, so you, liberal, you're the Nazi. Nazi? Except fascists put forth socialist ideas for popularity and control, not because so much of the country thinks the government should do better at keeping their citizens alive, like many modern non-fascist countries do. Also, fascists historically oppose all leftist parties, whether it's socialists, communists, or liberals. As the president's son says of Democrats, to me, they're not even people. Making dad proud. When the Hitler comparisons fly, someone might bring up that Trump has a Jewish son-in-law, okay? But fascism isn't specifically anti-Semitic. There are many races and ethnicities available that can be oppressed and rounded up and put on transport vehicles to detention centers and behind a wall to keep out animals. Just follow me to Mexico or Rwanda or Myanmar, where ethnic cleansing occurs and has nothing to do with Jewish people. And no, he's not rounding people up and putting them in camps, but he is sending a lot to ICE detention centers, and ICE is allowed to do much of this while ignoring due process, as I mentioned, sometimes under false pretenses, and they're separating families, which kind of reminds me of when Donald Trump's grandfather wrote a letter to the government begging to not be deported. But at least the chief of staff says that sure, they're tearing apart families, but the separated children will go into foster care or whatever, and at least that whatever is going to be warehouses in military bases. But at least ICE admitted that they lost 1,500 migrant children. But at least the ones who get there will be on a safe military base, and at least the US military fails to protect children from sexual abuse on bases, AP reports. Now, Trump isn't literally doing the exactly Hitler thing, but it sure sounds like he's putting some people into camps. And he has a love of sheriffs who make ostensibly concentration camps and run jails with human rights abuses in the name of law and order and crime and punishment. And it's really frustrating when people say it's not the same because fascists in 1944 committed genocide and fascists in 2017 are losers and idiots with bad ideas. But I will posit that fully implemented fascism at the height of Nazi Germany is not the same as the rise of fascism. You kinda skipped a bunch when the Nazis were a bunch of losers with bad ideas. There are phases of fascism. It doesn't happen overnight. In Robert Paxton's The 5 Stages of Fascism, he notes that early fascism arises from a deadlock of constitutional government, a weak liberal, an advancing left, and conservative leaders who refused to work with the left and who felt unable to continue to govern against the left without further reinforcement. Paxton also notes that fascist revolutionaries believe in change in the sense of, if we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change.
We're saying Merry Christmas again.
Fascists are also often marked by unprincipled opportunism and ideological dishonesty, which probably explains Trump's easy shift from a Democrat to a Republican that Democrats and Republicans hate. Paxton notes, the fascist leaders who have reached power historically have been condemned to govern in association with the conservative elites who had opened the gates to them, adding the Conservative Party's militants who clamor for jobs, perquisites, expansionist adventures, and the fulfillment of elements of the early radical program. Trump himself is obviously obsessed with hyper-nationalism. Oh, National Socialism! I finally get it. Scholars and people's eyes and ears have noticed his many autocratic authoritarian tendencies. He constantly rails against a synonym for Lugenpress and implements the same propaganda and slogans, and used to keep Hitler's speeches by his bed and when asked about it, reacted suspiciously. But wait, there's more. So let's close out with this kind of stuff. Oh, hello, thank you for watching. Please do all of the YouTube things, like and subscribe, and comment, and that stuff. And check out our Patreon if you want to support us for more videos, and our podcast, even more news for podcast things. And that is it.